Have you been considering purchasing a home but been worried that now might not be the right time? That you might buy now and then homes are going to be less valuable in a year? That's a super common fear, and I'd like to talk about that today. My name is John Gluch, and I'm the team leader of the Gluch Group. We help literally hundreds of people every year buy homes. And I want to talk about probably the biggest fear that home buyers have, which is I don't want to buy a house and then find out when I need to sell it that it's not worth what I paid for it, right? Like super common sense, especially given the fact that we're all still like, shuddering and cowering in the corner over the terrible depression that we had, or the Great Recession they call it, from 2007. Like I experienced that. We all experienced it. It was no fun. It was absolutely terrible. And so that's still like not that long ago. And I think we all have that in the back of our mind. So here's what I want to talk about: is the big picture. So let's take a look at U.S. home prices from 1965 all the way till today. And let's have a look at kind of history and what the facts say, and then use that to think about, okay, is it a good time to buy? Because it's not everybody should buy a house, certainly, but in terms of market timing, there are some things that you can do to put yourself in a good spot to make sure that you're not going to be in trouble. So first of all, overall, if we look at the chart here, what we can see is that, of course, home prices go up. Everybody knows that. I don't think anyone would argue that that's the case. Home prices go up in the long term, for sure. Now, what's interesting is home prices almost never go down. Like, we happen to have a really brutal experience of that from 2007 up until about 2011, 2010. We had a run where it was rough, right? It was no fun. We all remember that, signs on every corner, the whole thing. But that is by far the biggest downturn we've ever seen in US housing history, and it's kind of the only one. Like, we've had little dips here and there for short periods of time, but really that was a 3-year window where it was bad. And that was really wonky. It was super artificial. There was a bunch of reasons that happened that were unusual, to say the least. So in general, if you're betting that the market is going to fall apart, you would be on the wrong side of history. Like, that's super unusual. It's not that it never happens, but it's very, very unusual. So what I would say is, if you have the capacity to ride out, a 2-3 year window, then even very worst case scenario compared to the history of the United States, you're going to be okay. And lots of people did. They rode out the storm and they were fine, right? It was the people who bailed out at the bottom, and some people really kind of had to do that, who took the biggest hits. Even then, thankfully, we live in a non-recourse state in Arizona. So the lender cannot come after you personally for your assets. So they can't say, hey, you bought the house for $200,000, you had to sell it for $150 because things went really sideways, and we're going to sue you and make you pay the difference. That doesn't exist in Arizona, which is fantastic. There's some little specific circumstances. If you do a line of credit, check with your tax advisor and your attorney on that. But in general, buying a home, getting a normal mortgage in Arizona, they cannot come after you for the difference if things go sideways. So the worst case scenario is you're on the hook for the down payment you made on the house. So again, your risk is so low from the terms of historical perspective and from the terms of what you actually stand to lose, that in most cases, it does not make sense to wait to buy a house. You're almost always going to be in worse situation a year from now than you would be today. Like 99% of the time, all but about 3 years of our history is that the case. So should you buy a house? I would say there's a bunch of other factors. Make sure you've got some margin, all that other stuff. So we'll talk about that in other videos. But just from a market timing perspective, you're almost for sure going to be worse off in a year than you are today. So when my friends say, hey, should I wait? Is the market getting worse? I say no. Like, don't wait. Buy a house now. You're going to regret it a year from now if you don't. If you want to see up to the minute updates, so I'm talking about the big picture, the history of the United States here, but if you want to see like what's happening in Arizona today, on our blog we have a bunch of what we call bubble watch posts, because again, people have this fear of this impending bubble, and that we experienced it not long ago. I look at all the metrics that we consider to be most important, so I get really specific. Here I'm getting really general, but if you want specific information on, hey, here's what's happening this very minute in Arizona, check out the Bubble Watch. We've got those. We do at least every couple months those to keep you informed on what's going on in the market, and that'd be a good resource for you too. But big picture, historically, very, very unlikely that house prices will be lower a year from now, or certainly 3 years from now, than they are today. I tell people, if you have a 2 to 3 year window at a minimum where you're going to be here for a few years, you're going to stay in that house for a few years, for sure you'd be better off buying. You're going to come out on the right side of that equation. So that gives you big picture perspective. Hope that helps. As always, let us know if you have any questions. Give us a phone call, shoot us a message. We'd be happy to help out, and we would love to help you buy a house.